It starts in Cincinnati, 1857, not with a splash, not with a thud, but with a baby, a very large baby, born William Howard Taft. Even at birth, there was something substantial about him, not just in weight, which, according to some local accounts, rivaled a Christmas hambut in presence. He entered the world as if he already had opinions about judicial reform. His family was impressive. His father, Alphonso Taft, wasn't just a lawyer, he was a walking cabinet appointment, eventually serving as Attorney General and Secretary of War under President Ulysses S. Grant. The Tafts weren't nobility, but they had connections, brains, and a sense of elite Ohio confidence that screamed, "We read for pleasure and argue for sport. Young Will Never Billy, always Will," or Howard, wasn't the kind of kid who sprinted across fields. He was the kind who sat under trees, reading things, occasionally asking why the squirrels didn't have a judicial system. While other boys were breaking windows with baseballs, Will was correcting the grammar in their insults. He was always large, not in a hell-grow-into-it way, in a he-might-be-part-couch kind of way. But unlike the caricatures history would later slap on him, young Will was active. He played sports, he wrestled. He didn't love it, but he could do it. What he loved more than anything, though, was structure. His childhood was calm, bookish, warm, with a steady stream of expectations. Alphonso Taft expected greatness from his sons, the same way a furnace expects fire, regularly and without excuse. Will would deliver. He attended Woodward High School, where he quietly dominated with brains and bulk. He didn't pick fights. He dismantled them with syllogisms. If someone shoved him, he wouldn't punch at argue until they apologized for existing incorrectly. Then came Yale. At Yale, Taft wasn't just another Ohio boy trying to fit in. He was a force of gravitational pull. Roommates noted that he snored like a gentle locomotive and studied like he was preparing for a divine bar exam. He graduated second in his class, not first, mind you, because that guy wasn't also captain of the wrestling team. Yes, wrestling. Let that sink in. Taft was 5'11", 243 pounds in college, and still flipping dudes in singlets like a polite freight train. One classmate described shaking his hand as like being handed a warm ham. He didn't move fast, but when he did move, physics obeyed. He wasn't flashy. No drinking binges, no duels, just an enormous young man who loved law and tried not to sit on fragile things. By graduation, Will was set. He had the degree, the family name, and the kind of respectful ambition that didn't make you roll your eyes. He wasn't interested in fame. He wanted judgeships, specifically a seat on the Supreme Court. He said it out loud, repeatedly. "President?" people asked. "No, thank you," Taft would say, probably while polishing a monocle he didn't need. "I want to serve the law." Spoiler, the law would have to wait. Post-Yale, Taft did what all ambitious men of his era did. He became a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, he was good. Brilliant, even. Taft's legal mind was like a library with a personality disorder. Brilliant, obsessive, and able to quote 10 precedents in alphabetical order while napping. He became a judge by age 29. To put that into context, when you were 29, you were probably eating cereal in your pajamas, watching crime documentaries. Taft was rendering legal opinions that would make professors weep with joy. His decisions were clean, fair, and dull, in the best way possible. This is the era where Taft really begins building his legacy of mass and mind. He was known in Ohio as the civilized bulldozer, a man who never raised his voice but once gave a 3-hour speech on procedural justice that made people cheer. He also got married to Helen Nellie Herron, an educated, ambitious woman who supported him fiercely. Some even say she pushed him toward politics more than anyone else. She had vision, and Will had mass. They were opposites. Nellie was fire, Will was molasses, but together they climbed. Here's the thing. Taft never wanted to be president, and he said so, loudly, repeatedly, with increasing panic, but nobody listened. Because one day, a certain mustachioed tornado named Theodore Roosevelt came barreling into his life. Teddy was a walking caps lock button, a cowboy in a Harvard jacket. He loved Taft, thought he was brilliant, and decided that this was the man to carry his legacy forward. "Run for president," Roosevelt said. "No," Taft said. "Do it, or he'll throw you into the sun," Roosevelt said, probably while lifting a moose. So Taft said yes, because deep down, he was a dutiful man. He believed in service, in institutions, and in not disappointing his best friend. It was 1908. Taft was 51 years old, his waistline was approaching historical status, and he was about to become President of the United States, a job he never asked for, never wanted, and that history would never let him forget. But the moment that really got etched into America's memory didn't happen at a rally or a courtroom. It would allegedly happen a few months later, in a very small tub with a very large splash. William Howard Taft officially became President of the United States on March 4, 1909, swearing the oath of office on the steps of the Capitol, wearing a custom-tailored suit, standing under heavy snow, and looking mildly uncomfortable with the entire situation. The crowd was smaller than expected. The fanfare was subdued, even though the weather seemed to say, "Okay, fine, this is happening." But there he was, America's largest president, not metaphorically, literally. Taft clocked in at over 325 pounds and was growing steadily thanks to the White House kitchen staff, who in later interviews described his appetite as polite, steady, and slightly terrifying. He was not a commanding presence like Theodore Roosevelt, the firecracker who preceded him. Roosevelt had thundered into every room like a circus cannon. Taft, he entered like a legal textbook in human form. Respectable, weighty, slightly overdue, but in that moment, standing under snowflakes and ceremonial hats, Taft was now the most powerful man on earth. And with great power comes great plumbing responsibility. It's easy to forget that the White House in 1909 wasn't quite the shining symbol it is today. Yes, it had chandeliers and rooms named after colors, but it was also old, drafty, and full of antique furniture that shook nervously every time Taft sat down. More importantly, the bathtub. The infamous porcelain villain of our tale was not built for someone with massive presidential proportions. We don't know the make or model, we don't know if it was cast iron or ceramic, but we do know one thing. It was a standard-issue 19th century tub. Taft, on the other hand, was not standard-issue anything. Within weeks of moving in, rumors began circulating, quietly at first. Whispers, snickers in hallways, rumblings among the butlers and the kitchen staff. The president had taken a bath and didn't come out, or at least not without assistance. Here's what allegedly happened. Taft entered the White House bathroom for a routine soak. He likely wore something monogrammed. Perhaps he lit a cigar. He probably sighed contentedly. After all, who doesn't want to soak away a hard day of international diplomacy? But then the water displaced. The porcelain moaned. And then he sank. Whether it was a design flaw, gravitational betrayal, or simple spatial miscalculation, Taft found himself stuck, wedged, immovable, a gentle but immovable bulk surrounded by confused steam and a growing sense of panic. White House aides were summoned. Some tried pulling, others allegedly considered greasing the tub with soap, oil, or butter. One aide, according to the most unverified yet beloved version of the tale, had to go get a stick of lard from the kitchen. Yes, lard. Imagine that conversation. "I need lard." "Sir, it's midnight. The president is in the bath and cannot exit. I'll get the lard." It's like something out of a Looney Tunes short. With constitutional implications. We have to pause here, as any responsible pseudo-historian should. Is there proof that William Howard Taft ever got stuck in a White House bathtub? No. There are no written records in official archives. No diaries say, Monday, met with German ambassador. Tuesday, bath incident, still sore. But here's where it gets fun. The story appeared in multiple newspapers, was passed down through multiple generations of staff, and most importantly, it fit. It was the perfect visual: a big, gentle president, a fragile, undersized tub, a splash of panic. America's collective imagination grabbed hold like a tug-of-war team with soap on their hands. And once the story left the bathroom, there was no bringing it back. Soon after the alleged incident, coincidence or not, the White House ordered a custom bathtub. But not just any tub. This was the Godzilla of bathtubs. Built by the Mott Iron Works of Trenton, New Jersey, it measured 7 feet long, 41 inches wide, and could accommodate several small horses or one highly determined Supreme Court. Photos exist. 4 full-grown men sat inside it, in suits, proudly, like the world's most awkward barbershop quartet. The tub was delivered on a train flat car and hoisted into the White House with ropes and scaffolding. Let's say that, again, they had to crane lift the president's bathtub. That's not myth. That's documented. That tub was real. The myth, by this point, had gone viral No9 style. You couldn't open a paper without seeing a cartoon of Taft's feet sticking out of a drain. School kids joked about it. Political opponents used it. Furniture companies leaned in, advertising Taft-proof sofas. Even plumbers got involved. One ad read, "We make bathtubs for presidents big or small." So what did Taft think about all this? That's the strangest part. He never publicly addressed it. Not once did he say, "Dear citizens, I was not, in fact, greased out of a bathtub like a buttered, baked potato." He simply moved on. Perhaps he didn't want to dignify the rumor, or perhaps, just perhaps, he found it kind of funny. After all, Taft had a famously dry sense of humor. He once joked about his own weight, saying, "I'm not one of those fellows that believes you can do more work with less food." If anyone could survive being a walking punchline with class, it was him. Here's the tragic twist. In those early days, when Taft was trying to prove himself as a serious, independent leader, the bathtub story stole the show. He launched antitrust initiatives. He reorganized the postal system. He reformed civil service protections. And still, America asked, "But what about the tub, Will?" He wasn't flashy like Roosevelt. He didn't bark. He didn't brawl. He was slow, thoughtful, and deliberate like a professor explaining taxes to a caffeinated crowd. And while he was quietly getting things done, everyone else was picturing him stuck with his knees in the air and 4 aides yanking on his ankles. The legend spread because it was relatable. Presidents are often untouchable gods in suits. But Taft was a man who might have needed a rescue from a bathroom fixture. That's human. Picture it now. The steam is thick. The White House is quiet. A giant of a man sinks into a tub, too small to hold him. Somewhere, a floorboard creaks. He sits, then shifts, then realizes he's not coming out. Somewhere downstairs, someone drops a tray of oysters. The kitchen door swings open. A young staffer in suspenders is handed a jar of lard with the grim words, "The president is jammed." It started like a whisper behind gloved hands. Then it became a chuckle in salons, a snort in taverns, a smirk passed from barbershop to newsstand. By the spring of 1909, barely months into William Howard Taft's presidency, the myth of the bathtub incident had spread far beyond the bathroom walls of the White House. Whether it actually happened or not, no longer mattered. It was real in the minds of the people. And in that peculiar space between politics and plumbing history met punchline. To understand what happens next, you need to know one thing. Early 20th century American newspapers were completely unhinged. They were loud, sensational, and filled with exclamation points. These were the glory days of yellow journalism, where facts were optional and dramatic headlines were practically a civic duty. If you so much as sneezed in public as a prominent figure, a headline somewhere read, Is the president dying of plague cough? So when someone, an aide, a rival, a gossipy plumber, or perhaps an imaginative journalist, leaked that Taft had allegedly gotten stuck in his bathtub, it was game over. Papers ran with it. Hard. Some described it in glorious fictionalized detail. Others kept it vague but suggestive. A few claimed the truth had been suppressed by executive order, which, frankly, only made it more fun. You could practically hear the typewriters sweating from excitement. Taft's tub troubles. President washes away dignity in porcelain disaster. Bathtub requires presidential expansion. White House remodeled to accommodate massive man. Was it satire? Was it real? Did the President of the United States truly call for help while trapped mid-soak? It didn't matter. The American people were hooked. And cartoonists? Oh, the cartoonists feasted. If political cartoons are the first draft of public memory, then Taft's legacy was sketched with suds and soap bars. Suddenly, every editorial page featured illustrations of Taft half-submerged, legs dangling over the rim like an upended couch cushion. Some drew exaggerated versions of his size, transforming him into a literal marshmallow in a sea of porcelain. Others got more creative, a giant Taft floating down the Potomac River in a bathtub like a presidential rubber duck. Cabinet members holding buckets of butter labeled Emergency Exit Aid, a fictional bill titled the Tub Expansion Act of 1909, passing through Congress. It was political comedy on overdrive. And in the early 1900s, when America desperately wanted to laugh at something not involving monopolies or malaria, this was the perfect storm. It wasn't just the visual of a large man in a small tub. It was about making the presidency human. Presidents were seen as distant, powerful, sometimes divine figures. They gave speeches, they led armies, they carved countries with pens and proclamations. But Taft? If the myth was to be believed, Taft had the same problems as any regular guy, with an IKEA tub and a questionable center of gravity. People loved the idea of a president being embarrassed because it made him relatable. This was the ultimate stars. They're just like us. Moment, decades before tabloids would show George W. Bush buying snacks or Obama playing basketball. The idea that the president could be reduced to a cartoonish slip in the bath was pure comedic gold. The American public laughed, loudly, and often. While the country giggled, Taft was out here doing actual work. He was pushing for tariff reform, which sounds boring but was economically explosive. He was taking on big corporations, building on the trust-busting legacy of Roosevelt. He passed the Mann-Elkins Act, beefed up the Interstate Commerce Commission, and even tried to simplify the federal budget process. None of it got as much attention as the tub. He could break up a railroad monopoly. And the next morning, the editorial page would still read, Taft unstuck, new tub installed, stock market rebounds. His real accomplishments were drowned out pun, very much intended by a single myth he never even confirmed. The presidency is a hard enough job without having to drag a porcelain rumor around like a second term. Here's a fun twist. Theodore Roosevelt, who handpicked Taft as his successor, also got wind of the tub tale. And he loved it. Roosevelt, the original human exclamation point, had a loud, brash sense of humor. And while he eventually turned on Taft politically, for a while, he probably enjoyed watching his more reserved friend get dragged by bathtub cartoons. You can imagine Teddy thumping his desk with glee. He got stuck, you say? Delightful. Someone draw it again, but this time with a rope. Privately, Roosevelt may have been furious that his legacy was being washed away in jokes, but publicly, he laughed along. By the time Roosevelt re-entered politics in 1912 and ran against Taft, he didn't even have to say much. The country had already decided Taft was the boring bathtub guy. This is where things get complicated. Because while the tub tale is funny, it's also rooted in fat phobia. Let's not sugarcoat it. America made Taft the butt of a very specific, very relentless kind of joke. It wasn't just about bathtubs. It was about size, about shape, about dignity. Every cartoon, every headline, every whispered schoolyard tale reinforced the idea that large people were funny, clumsy, and unfit for leadership. Taft, to his credit, never lashed out. He carried the jokes with quiet resignation, sometimes even leaned into them. But the truth is, they followed him everywhere. This wasn't a one-off joke. This became his historical identity. A man with brilliant legal skill, thoughtful foreign policy, and deep commitment to service reduced to bathroom folklore. Because no matter how unfair or how unverified the tale was, it felt sticky. It felt visual. It felt like something America wanted to believe. A president, stuck in his own bathroom. Not shot, not impeached, not overthrown, just stuck. A metaphor? Maybe. A joke? Definitely. A memory? Absolutely. If legends are forged in steel, then William Howard Taft's legacy was forged in porcelain. Because while the rumor of his getting stuck in a White House bathtub roared through the headlines, the White House did something far more concrete. It ordered a custom bathtub, a real one, a big one, a tub so large and so wide, it wasn't just a bathroom fixture, it was a national monument to bulk, bathing, and presidential logistics. This is the story of the most famous bathtub in American history and the 4 men who proudly posed inside it like weird, patriotic mermaids. Taft didn't comment on the rumors. But not long after the story went national, a very real decision was made. They needed a bigger tub. Not just because of the myth, but because, well, Taft was a large man with real physical needs. And if you're the leader of the free world, you shouldn't have to worry about being suction-cupped into an antique soaking bowl from 1852. So the White House reached out to the Mott Iron Works in Trenton, New Jersey. Mott wasn't some fly-by-night company. They were big-time, industrial plumbing titans. They made bathtubs the way shipbuilders made hulls, with pride, muscle, and zero room for modesty. The order went out. Design a tub that will fit the President of the United States and still leave room for dignity. The final result? A monster of a bathtub. Length, 7 feet. Width, 41 inches. Weight, over 1,000 pounds empty. Capacity, technically 1 president, but tested with 4 full-grown men at once. Let's pause there. This wasn't a bathtub. It was a marble canoe, a porcelain limousine, a hydrothermal amphitheater. You could bathe in it, sure, but you could also rehearse Shakespeare in it. To test its presidential suitability, the manufacturers filled the tub with 4 Mott employees, grown men, in suits, sitting shoulder to shoulder like the world's most awkward jazz quartet. A photograph was taken. This isn't legend. This isn't rumor. This happened. The photo was distributed in newspapers with headlines like 4 men, 1 tub fit for a president. The subtext was clear. This tub won't lose to Taft. Now came the challenge. How do you get a bathtub the size of a Buick to the White House? The answer, very carefully. First, it was loaded onto a train, flat car, the kind usually reserved for lumber, steel, or entire horses. It was then secured with chains, like a captured dragon, and transported across state lines under the careful supervision of very serious men in very small hats. Upon arrival in Washington, D.C., a crane was brought in to hoist the tub off the train. Crowds gathered. Reporters scribbled. One child allegedly asked, "Is that where the president sleeps now?" Once off the train, the tub was paraded down the street on a cart covered with a tarp, as if to hide the national shame or perhaps protect national security. It took multiple men to carry it inside. Historical records don't say exactly how many, probably because the number was embarrassing. We do know that by the time it reached the 2nd floor of the White House, a few door frames had to be adjusted. That's right. The president got a tub so big, the building had to accommodate it. not the other way around. Let that be a lesson. Power isn't always about legislation. Sometimes it's about being so big the house changes for you. Here's what makes it even better. At the time, Taft was pushing for massive government reform, breaking up monopolies, reshaping civil service, revising tariffs. But the only reform the public seemed to care about, bathtub expansion. Some newspapers began running mock editorials pretending to be the tub. As the newly installed presidential bathtub, I demand respect. I was engineered for greatness and I will not tolerate jokes about lard or suction noises. Others ran political cartoons of congressmen debating the Tub Appropriations Act. One popular illustration featured two factions, pro-tub versus anti-tub, each shouting over the size of the soap dish. People loved it. Presidential bathing had become political theater. Yes, you read that right. Not satisfied with just one megatub, Taft had another installed on the presidential yacht. Why? Because, apparently, even at sea, the president must bathe boldly. This one was similar in size, though possibly with a more marine-friendly installation. Imagine Taft stepping into the tub on a gently rocking boat, cigar in mouth, reading legal opinions, while drifting along Chesapeake Bay. Somewhere off camera, a sailor quietly prays, "Please don't capsize, sir." Let's return to that iconic photo. 4 men, 1 tub, all fully dressed, staring into the camera with forced cheer and vague dread. Their names are lost to time, but they are heroes. These brave test subjects sacrificed their pride for plumbing, for the presidency, for America. Some say they were volunteers. Others whisper they were told, "Sit in this tub or you're fired." What we do know is that this photo cemented the myth. From that moment on, it didn't matter whether Taft had gotten stuck or not. He now had a monument to the myth of bathtub so big it might as well have had its own electoral votes. For years, people asked where the tub went. The original getting stuck tub likely vanished into plumbing history. But the custom tub, that one made the rounds. It became an artifact, a relic. Today, replicas of it exist in places like the Taft Presidential Library and Museum in Cincinnati, where you can sit in it, take pictures, pretend to be the most polite, enormous president in American history. And if you're lucky, you'll hear the docent say, "No flash photography. And please, don't get stuck." The year is 1910. William Howard Taft has been president for over a year. He's signed bills, he's shaken hands, he's reorganized federal courts and pressured Congress to pass antitrust legislation. But if you were to read the newspapers or overhear conversations in American barbershops, diners, or train stations, the topic people brought up the most was not tariff reform. It was his body, not his mind, not his diplomacy, not even the law books he read like bedtime stories. Just his weight. And it wasn't just a passing observation. It was an obsession. This is the part of the story where we shift, just a little, because while the bathtub legend may be funny, even charming in the exaggerated world of presidential mythology, the attention paid to Taft's body wasn't always humorous. It was relentless, personal, and often cruel. Let's get something straight. Taft was a big man. That's not an insult. That's just fact. He was around 5 feet 11 inches tall, and his weight fluctuated between 300 and 350 pounds during his presidency. Today, with modern diets and medications, that might not raise many eyebrows. But in the early 1900s, a man that size in politics in the White House was a walking contradiction. He didn't look like the ideal leader. He didn't fit the mold of military hero or cowboy adventurer. He wasn't rough and ready like Roosevelt, who rode horses and punched bears for fun. Instead, Taft looked like a man who should be reading case law while sitting very still and not bumping any furniture. With Roosevelt gone, journalists were hungry for spectacle, and Taft's body became that spectacle. Political cartoons showed him sinking into chairs, crowding elevators, breaking benches, needing 2 seats on a train. One even showed him attempting to ride a bicycle with the tires folded flat beneath him. A newspaper in Boston once published a piece headlined, "Is the White House chair reinforced?" Even so-called serious journalists slipped in comments like, "The president carried his weight with dignity, most of it in his midsection." It wasn't just comedic exaggeration. It was a full-on narrative. Taft was fat. Therefore, Taft was lazy, indulgent, ineffective, soft. A bad body meant, in their eyes, a bad president. And the bathtub story? That was the cherry on top, the perfect punchline. A way to reduce every speech, every policy, every moment of dignity to the fat man who got stuck. With quiet pain. He never lashed out. He never gave emotional interviews. But his private letters, those tell another story. In a letter to a friend, he wrote, "I am doing my best to reduce. I have not eaten a potato in 2 months." In another, more revealing note, he says, "I walk every day. I weigh myself every morning. The public is watching too closely." He wasn't oblivious. He felt the spotlight and the judgment behind it. Taft loved food. He loved dinner. He loved quiet conversation over generous portions, and he hated being scrutinized for it. He wasn't a glutton. He was just American. Historians love to point out that Taft was the first president to go on a publicly acknowledged weight loss program. The White House doctor at the time, Dr. Nathaniel E. York Davies, yes, that's a real name, put Taft on a strict daily regimen. Breakfast, orange toast, coffee, lunch, broiled meat, salad, no bread. Dinner, soup, lean meat, stewed fruit, no dessert, no butter, no potatoes, no wine. It worked for a time. Taft lost over 60 pounds in a year, but the stress of the job, combined with his lifelong habits, made the weight return. Like so many people today, Taft cycled between trying to change and simply trying to live. It's one thing to make jokes about the fat president. It's another to know that every time he walks into a room, is wondering if the chairs will hold, that every time he speaks to Congress, he's imagining the next cartoon, another drawing of him squeezing into a tub labeled progressive reform. Taft endured that pressure quietly. He didn't have press agents or body-positive bloggers defending him. There was no Taft talk filled with fans saying, "Big is powerful." There was just Taft. A man who believed in duty, who read the Constitution like it was poetry, who dreamed not of fame, but of sitting on the Supreme Court and writing legal opinions in peace. But first, he had to survive a presidency that treated his body like a sideshow. It's worth asking, would a thin Taft have been treated the same if he were lean, athletic, square-jawed? Would the seer press have forgiven his cautious leadership style? Would voters have seen his deliberation as wisdom instead of indecision? Would the country have remembered him as the president who restructured the postal service and expanded civil service protections? Instead of the guy who allegedly got stuck in a tub, maybe. Or maybe America has always been shallow. Even today, presidential candidates are judged for their waistlines, fitness, hairstyles, posture. Let's be real. Half of Twitter thinks doing push-ups means you're qualified to control nuclear codes. But in 1910, there was no social media, no viral clips, just sketches, headlines, and weight. And poor Taft had no choice but to carry it all literally and symbolically. Despite everything, the jokes, the cartoons, the nationwide meme, Taft never lost his composure. He continued to work, quietly, faithfully, competently. He joked about his size in small circles. He tried to lose weight again and again, but he never let it stop him from doing the job. He held state dinners with grace. He met with world leaders without flinching. He signed bills while wearing suits tailored by frustrated men who cursed every time they ran out of cloth. And somewhere, deep down, he probably wished he could just be remembered for the work. Here's a moment in every political figure's life when their legacy teeters on the edge of absurdity. For William Howard Taft, most of these moments involved furniture. While the infamous bathtub story steals the spotlight, another tale has bubbled through the back rooms of American law with equal stubbornness. The chair incident. Depending on who tells it, Taft sat in a chair at Yale during an alumni event. The chair cracked or collapsed or exploded like an angry folding table at a WWE match, and the crowd either gasped, laughed, or politely pretended nothing happened. But did it really happen? Or is this just another piece of slapstick furniture folklore built on a pile of assumptions and reinforced by decades of cartoon exaggeration? It's time we investigate one of history's most enduring sounds. Crack. The alleged event took place in 1913, after Taft had left the presidency and returned to Yale as a guest speaker. The room was full. The crowd was respectful. The chairs were fragile. According to the most dramatic retellings, Taft walked on stage, smiled warmly, and gently lowered himself onto a wooden armchair, the kind made in the 1800s by a sad craftsman with dreams of small, buttered professors. The second Taft sat down. Crack, snap, collapse. Today, the myth is self-sustaining, a joke passed down like sacred lore. Kindergarten teachers whisper it on field trips. Redditors revive it with vintage GIFs. Drunk history bros reenact it with pool floaties and fake mustaches. And somewhere in the soggy corridors of collective memory, William Taft sits in a porcelain throne, arms crossed, brow raised, whispering, "If I must be remembered, let me be remembered." Drenched. By now, William Howard Taft has transcended flesh. He is myth, meme, mascot, the bathtub, president. For over a century, the world has collectively agreed that what matters most about this brilliant lawyer, judge, diplomat, and executive leader is a tub. And you know what? That might be the most presidential thing of all. The eternal soak. Legacies are tricky. You can be brilliant. You can be powerful. You can shape nations. But what truly sticks? The awkward moment. The offhand detail. The one story that makes everyone say, "Wait, what?" In Taft's case, it wasn't his diplomacy. It wasn't his time as Secretary of War. It wasn't his trust-busting, his constitutional reforms, or his role as Chief Justice. It was the idea, true or not, that he couldn't get out of a bathtub. That image, absurd, exaggerated slapstick, is now a permanent part of the American historical experience. And that's kind of beautiful. Humor is immortality. Most presidents are remembered like marble statues, stoic, cold, distant, quoting some speech nobody actually heard in full. But Taft, he's remembered like a sitcom dad who got a little too comfy in the guest bathroom. He's remembered with laughter. And that means, and he's remembered. Not as a flawless hero, not as a cautionary tale, but he has something far rarer, human. And in that vulnerability, in that image of a man too large for the structures around him, we find not just comedy, but connection. You see, the bathtub wasn't just porcelain. It became a symbol. For every moment in life where we feel stuck, don't fit, can't move, panic in our own silence, need help, but don't want to ask, it reminds us that even presidents, especially presidents, have their bathtub moments. And they survive. They laugh. They dry off. They go to work the next day like nothing happened. That's resilience. That's Taft. The legacy he deserves, or the one he needed? Let's be honest. Taft was never built for stardom. He was a legal nerd in a Roosevelt world. He wanted to be a judge, not a showman. He liked routine, naps, and absolutely hated the spotlight. And yet, he accidentally became one of the most beloved trivia facts of all time. Because in a field of polished marble busts and unread biographies, Taft's is the one people remember, not out of mockery but out of joy. He's not forgotten, he's quoted, animated, cosplayed, sung about in bathtub-themed Broadway TikToks. Yes, those exist. That's more than legacy. That's folklore. He was never just the tub. At the end of the day, Taft was the only person to serve as both US President and Chief Justice, a skilled diplomat, a deeply thoughtful leader, a gentle giant who tried to bring logic to a political circus. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He didn't want to be famous. And ironically, that made him iconic. He didn't seek the myth. The myth found him, and in doing so, it brought new generations to wonder, wait, who was Taft again? And when they ask that question, they dig deeper, they read, they learn, they discover the man behind the myth. Final soak. So, did William Howard Taft get stuck in a bathtub? We still don't know. Probably not. Maybe a little. Definitely, metaphorically. But does it matter? Absolutely not. Because what matters is that we laughed. We remembered. We made memes, songs, animations, soap bars, and t-shirts. And in a world full of forgotten legacies, the man in the tub continues to float, smiling, soaking, and living rent-free in our collective imagination. Unless you want a sequel where Teddy Roosevelt and Taft battle in a steampunk bathhouse with rubber ducky drones. Thank you for taking the plunge.